Hello and welcome to ChinnyVision for It's a Knockout 2017. By 1986, TV tie-ins were a big deal, Ocean especially going for shows that had immediate appeal in order to gain extra sales for their games, and It's a Knockout was not a TV hit at the time, but had been one a few years before. So rather than me try to explain what It's a Knockout is, I thought I'd ask on to ChinnyVision a top TV expert, a TV historian. So welcome to Louis Bath. And so, Louis, what was It's a Knockout all about?
It's a Knockout was a game show, but a game show like no other, in that it involved massive oversized costumes, lots of coloured water, and ramps mainly. It was sort of like a novelty assault course, and it was enhanced hugely by the presence of Eddie Waring, a man who mangled the English language beautifully.
Of course, it was a kind of 60s and 70s thing, really, because it kind of ended by 82.
Yeah, 82, when I was 9, and that was a horrible day for me because I used to pray that It's a Knockout would come somewhere near me. It was always done in public parks and places like that.
So there's lots of pre-publicity from Ocean, very glossy magazine adverts, promising much very colourful and eye-catching. And we're going to start off on the Spectrum version, loading screen by Dawn, and has the playing cards that you saw in the game. You can see there's 6 countries that take part. Britain, Germany, France, Italy, Belgium and Holland, and you can play with up to 6 players. Not simultaneously, you play one after the other. So you have to go through all this at the beginning with various events already happening, and you will take your turn at in order, and it's different every time the computer selects. So yes, there is a lot of sitting through this particular part of the game. So I've selected to play as Britain, so we should shortly be playing the game. Hopefully. I bought this game in Hamley's Toy Store in London. The only kind of game I think I ever bought in London. We were on a day out and had a big computer game section there. So the first level on the Spectrum version is Flying FLANS, and you have to collect FLANS that have been thrown in the air by the 2 people on the left-hand side. They're all hit on a kind of seesaw thing. They land in a different place each time. You cannot move around easily. It's not apparent, but the more FLANS that land, the more you skid around on the ground. And when you've collected a FLAN, you take it to the right-hand side of the screen and your counter goes up. So we've got 3 at the moment. Over the Amstrad CPC version with a loading screen that replicates the colourful advert very, very well. Quite a nice loading screen, not by the same person as the Spectrum version. And so, yeah, it's all looking quite promising at the moment. And you, as I say, on the Spectrum version, you pick number of players and you pick a country for each player. And again, you have to sit through on the Amstrad version what you had to sit through on the Spectrum. If you were playing obviously with 6 players, you wouldn't be sitting through all this. You'd be playing it one after the other, and I suppose it's quite a lot of players if you can have 6 players against each other. So same deal on the Amstrad version here. It's Flying FLANS, and the FLANS come up in the top of the screen. They fly down into random places. It's a little bit slower than the Spectrum version, much more colourful, very basic graphics. This is a game predominantly for kids. Yeah. Ocean Software released it in 1986. Came out end of 86, which is, people think mid-80s, they think of the It's a Royal Knockout tournament, which was a big thing in 87.
Yeah.
But this came out way before that was announced. And it's a bit of a odd licensing choice for Ocean to get a game, license a TV show that effectively been defunct for 4 or 5 years.
I can only assume that it was incredibly cheap.
That probably is, because I think Ocean were very much, they realised that anything they could license with recognisable names sold better than anything that was just a generic, generic game.
I mean, by that point, they should have been licensing Ultra Quiz or something like that.
Well, this does have, when you start playing the game, it does have a hint of Ultra Quiz about it, because you look at the locations in the game, and it's globetrotting, which is what...
Maybe they've developed the game as Ultra Quiz, and then David Frost said, I want this, and they went, no. And they thought, well, what's a bit like Ultra Quiz? We've done the game now. And they went to the BBC and they went, yeah, you can have, it's a knockout for £5.
Over the C64, you actually do get music on the title screen. And so here we go. As Britain, press any key or press A key to start. Oh, and it's much, much faster. Incredibly fast, in fact. To the point where the physics are very questionable. The FLANS fly up in almost a triangular path. They come straight down at a 45-degree angle, very, very fast. I do like the background graphics. It's a knockout style. There were lots of giant characters in its knockout. People having to dress up in giant foam costumes to play games. It's nice to see on the C64 version. There's a recognition, at least, of giant chefs in the background. Very fast and very difficult on the C64. Also, that giant logo down the right hand side with it's a knockout. The play area is actually quite small when you start to think about it. So we're completing it here on the Spectrum. I've managed to get 7. It's starting to get quite difficult to move around now. So I've scored 7 on the Specky, which puts me behind most of the other countries. And the next round on the Specky is Bronte Bash. Now this second round doesn't appear in the same order on the C64 and the Spectrum. Bronte Bash, I think, is 3rd on the C64 and the Amstrad CPC, sorry. It's 2nd on the Spectrum, so I'm following the Spectrum version here. Over to the Amstrad CPC, same deal. What happens is a Brontosaurus pops up from a hole and you drop a 1-ton weight on him, and it gets gradually faster as the time limit runs down, to the point where the game's absolutely impossible unless you have superhuman skills. In fact, when the time limit really does run down, it's just utterly impossible. Nice volcano erupting in the background. And on the C64, it's incredibly fast to begin with and just gets even faster. The one thing I was just thinking about this as well is if you look on the adverts for this, they do actually mention Janson Frontier, which yes. I'm thinking, well, Ocean were probably thinking, and it was still running in some European countries, they're probably thinking, European sales here.
True. And also mentioned in Peter Gabriel, Games Without Frontiers.
Next level on the Specky is a HARLEM Hoppers. It's level 2 on the C64 and Amstrad. And you have a ball drop down a camel, yes, and you have to catch it, but you are attached to a piece of elastic that constantly pulls you back, making it hard to run forward. I quite like the Amstrad version graphics. Just kind of works. That camel looks very surprised. Looks like the camel that Legs & Co. danced around with on Top of the Pops. What song was it? Egyptian Reggae, I think. With a trip hazard of a carpet around as well. Two members of Legs & Co. in camels. It's got to be said that when you're playing a game you start talking about Legs & Co. on Top of the Pops, it perhaps isn't holding your attention terribly well. Over to the C64, in a very odd-shaped camel there. The hump is appears to be in the wrong place. Quite bizarre on the C64 how the anatomy of that camel. The next challenge or level is in tremendously good taste. It's Titanic Drop. Yes, you drop off the side of the Titanic into a rubber ring. You have to, depending on the colour of the ring, which constantly changes, that's how many points you get. It's incredibly difficult. it's more luck than judgment that you're going to drop into one of the rubber rings that are flashing, especially with the fact that the colours change so fast. And is there a sequence? I think there is a sequence here. Actually, I don't think there is. A little bit slower on the Amstrad, just a bit easier to play and drop into a rubber ring. Although, it's still more luck than judgment that you actually do drop in. You think there might be some jolly It's a Knockout music when you're playing the game or any of these versions. No, it's just sound effects. And after all that animation going on in the previous level, nothing going on in the background on this level. And the C64 version is much faster, but it's incredibly hard again because of the speed and just the difficulty of dropping into the right place. The next level is called Diet of Worms, where you're a chicken, you have to eat the worms and drop them into the tray. Again, it's departing quite significantly from the It's a Knockout TV formula, which was mainly about running on assault courses and giant chefs and all sorts of things and getting wet.
Yeah, but my problem with all of this is that they're all of the things are the same size, and what you need is ordinary sized people, and then 9-foot butlers.
That's lacking, and also you got things like the
foam rubber butlers trying to get trays of coloured water up a ramp. I think it has been developed as something else, and they go, what can we get for cheap? It's a Knockout. One of the interesting things about It's a Knockout is, and unfortunately involves mentioning the disgraced Stuart Hall, is that after It's a Knockout finished on telly, Stuart Hall bought all of the costumes and props and kept them in a warehouse in Cheshire and hired them out for corporate away days.
There's just something about this game where it doesn't quite ring true to It's a Knockout. Although on the C64 version you have that wonderful artwork, at least in the background, which is reminiscent of the TV show, even if the game has very little to do with the TV vehicle. And of course, a multi-level game like this, a multi-stage game like this, wouldn't be complete without some kind of waggle the joystick race. And you'd think that Ocean would be able to get this stuff right. After all, they'd already released Decathlon, which is the definitive waggle the joystick game on the 8-bits. Certainly, the 8-bits very own version of Track and Field. Yet, here we are. And looking at the Amstrad version here, it's slow and just no fun at all. And yet Daley Thompson's Decathlon on the CPC, and the other version is absolutely brilliant. Okay, it's going to break your joystick, but it's brilliant. And here I am on the Amstrad, and it's just chugging along. And some of the obstacles, like the giant balls, are difficult to avoid. On the C64 version, at least you've got a bit of speed, and the balls are much smaller so you can avoid them, but it's just absolutely rubbish. So, after all that, naturally, I have come last out of the 6 countries. And yet, it is quite difficult to get a high placing in this game because some of these games rely so much on luck rather than skill. So, Louis Bath has been watching all of this, and as a fan of It's a Knockout when it was on TV, what did you make of all this?
Being 44, sitting here now, I think this isn't It's a Knockout. However, in 1986, when I was 13, I would probably have fallen on it gratefully because I loved It's a Knockout, and it didn't have any videotapes of it or anything, and it was never repeated. So even that sort of homeopathic level of resemblance would have ensured a sale to me if I'd known about it, but I didn't know about it until you told me about it the other day. And I would probably have enjoyed it hugely, going, because I genuinely loved It's a Knockout. I thought it was a great show.
Thank you, Louis, and I should mention your book, The Superb Trials and Triumphs of Les Dawson, one of the best biographies of anyone I've read. So It's a Knockout. Does it really live up to the TV series? Unquestionably, Ocean got incredibly lucky with this game, with all the publicity of the It's a Royal Knockout tournament in 1987 they probably didn't know about when they licensed the game in 1986, so I'm guessing a fair few people bought this game off the back of that as well. Overall, all three versions are pretty weak. C64 version is very, very fast, which makes the game even harder. CPC version looks very nice, perhaps a little bit too slow. The Spectrum is a nice middling speed. Gameplay is exactly the same between all of them. At the end of the day, the It's a Knockout computer game is probably a bit like the TV series in that it's an interesting curiosity to look back at, but it's probably best left in its era.